Well, we have another serious problem because Russia continues to test nuclear weapons and now has said that they have a nuclear powered missile. The missile, which they're going to talk about and we'll talk about in a moment, is a longer range missile, can stay in the air much longer, and this is extremely concerning to the United States. But guess what President Trump says? President Trump says, after Russia's Skyfall missile test, Trump says the U.S. has a nuclear submarine right off their shores. According to experts, tensions are starting to rise, and all of this is coming after Vladimir Putin called President Trump a couple weeks ago, talked to him for about 2 hours, got him to pretty much commit to not sending Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine. The next day, President Zelensky from Ukraine was upset because President Trump said, no, we're not going to send you those Tomahawk cruise missiles. And now Russia is continuing to test new missiles that could hit Ukraine and could really take this war to the next level. That has some believing that the United States' only option is to step into this fight. And I'll explain why in a moment. But let's get right down to business. Look at this right here. It says, Putin says Russia now has nuclear-powered missile. Because of its power source, the Burevestnik can remain airborne far longer than other nuclear-armed missiles. Yeah, that's a tough one to say. Anyway, I want to read it to you. It says Russia has successfully tested its nuclear-powered and nuclear-capable Burevestnik missile and is preparing to deploy it. Vladimir Putin said Sunday a pointed message to the West after plans for a summit with President Trump collapsed. It says because the weapon runs on nuclear power, it can fly for much longer than other missiles can, and the Kremlin says is capable of evading missile defense systems. One of the problems with missile defense systems is some of them can't fly forever. Eventually, they have to come down. The problem with this new nuclear-powered missile is it can stay in the air much longer. I want to read something to you. It says right here, this is a unique product that no one in the world has. That's what Vladimir Putin said in a meeting. Now, he says we need to identify potential uses and begin preparing the infrastructure for deploying this weapon in our armed forces. So not only do they have it, they're planning to deploy it. That's concerning, extremely concerning. But look at this. Okay, it says, sidelined Russia flexes muscle with missile launch, and Trump is not impressed. President Trump said that he wasn't impressed. But look at this. It says Russia's testing of an invincible nuclear-powered cruise missile with a potentially unlimited range has been met with a less than impressed response from U.S. President Donald Trump as a new cold front opens up between the countries. It says it boasted that the missile, which can carry conventional or nuclear warheads and codenamed Skyfall by NATO, can change direction mid-flight and move vertically and horizontally, meaning it can invade missile and air defenses. It says right here, President Trump, who's undertaking a whirlwind tour of Asia and is also set to meet Chinese President Xi Jinping on Thursday, was not impressed with the missile launch, telling reporters Monday that Putin should focus on ending the war in Ukraine instead. He said, I don't think it's an appropriate thing for Putin to be saying either, by the way. You ought to get the war ended. The war that should have taken 1 week is now in its 4th year. That's what you ought to do instead of testing missiles. That's what President Trump said. Now, here's where things are getting interesting. According to reports, President Trump is going to almost rely on China and Xi Jinping to try to get Russia to accept a ceasefire. So President Trump not only is going there to talk about tariffs and the trade agreements, but according to reports, and obviously rare earths, but according to reports, he is going there to try to become more friendly with Xi Jinping so that he can convince Russia now's the time to back off. Now, I want to play something for you. Listen to this right here. Let me know your thoughts.
Nick, Russia says it successfully tested its new nuclear-capable missile. So what does that mean for the war in Ukraine?
So, Diane, every time Russia gets concerned that the West, particularly the United States, might introduce a new weapon system like the Tomahawk, which would be a very effective long-range missile, they start talking about their nuclear weapons. It's what the NATO countries call the Skyfall. It isn't new. We've known about it for quite some time. It does concern the West because it's essentially very difficult to track because it can stay aloft for long periods of time. But
I do want to point out one thing really quick. The reason why this is so concerning, even though it's been around for quite some time, it's the fact that we are having increased tensions with Russia, with other countries as well. The United States and President Trump is pushing to try to get Russia to accept some type of peace agreement. That's why it's such a big issue. It's not the fact that this is brand new. That's not the issue. The issue is tensions are increasing. And President Trump, according to reports, doesn't feel that good about what President Vladimir Putin has done over the past several months. And the fact that they had a face-to-face agreement in Alaska, had another one planned but not scheduled, and then Vladimir Putin and President Trump called it off because President Trump says he doesn't want to waste his time. That shows that we are not anywhere close to a deal. So the fact that they're now testing this missile is extremely concerning.
It doesn't really change the dynamics of the nuclear triad for the United States nor Russia. But it is important to point out that the last bilateral agreement between the United States and Russia is set to expire in February. And there's really no talk about extending that. If that expires, then there'll be no cap on nuclear weapons deployed or launch sites in each other's country.
Nick, what message do you think Russia's trying to send with this announcement?
They're trying to send a message not to approve the Tomahawk. They do that. They did that for the F-16, the M1 Abrams, the HIMARS, just about every advanced weapon system that has a significant chance to change the dynamics on the battlefield. They start talking nuclear weapons.
I do want to point out that's something that many experts have reported multiple times over the past couple months, is that every time President Trump puts out a message saying that he's considering the Tomahawk missiles, he's considering an escalation, he's considering something, Russia comes to the table and let's talk, or let's test our missiles today. Let's go and do this, and let's send a submarine down off the coast of Florida, right? This is something that they are known to do. So the fact of the matter is this: right now, nobody is content with where we're at. Everybody is extremely concerned, and the entire world is on high alert, all because of what is going on with Russia. Let's keep listening.
The bottom line is the reason why Ukraine's in this is the United States pushed them to give up their nuclear weapons to Russia for the exchange of the United States protecting them against any kind of invasion. So that's where and that was in Budapest, by the way, where the proposed summit was going to happen before the United States canceled it. So this is something that the Russians do every time. Unfortunately, everybody knows they have nuclear weapons. So does the United States. So do several European countries. They should never be used. But ultimately, in order to change this to the point where Putin would agree with a ceasefire, they have to see that they start losing. And the only way to do that is to advance these or send these advanced weapon systems to Ukraine to use against, as Ian said, valid military targets when it comes to Ukraine, not the same way that the Russians target Ukraine.
Okay. So right there, what he said at the very end of that, extremely important. The only way to advance the talks is for the United States to give these additional weapons to Ukraine. But Vladimir Putin has already said if you give these to Ukraine, that just constitutes a war. Okay, that's an act of war right there. So this is where President Trump is put into a very tough situation. And this is where he's trying to listen to these Pentagon officials and these experts telling him this is the way we should go about it. That's why the reports are indicating that President Trump is going to meet with Xi Jinping on Thursday of this week. And what they decide to do is going to be monumental. Because if China and the United States can't agree on a trade agreement, can't agree on rare earths, can't agree on anything, it would be very difficult and almost impossible for the United States to get China on board to tell Russia to back off so that we do not escalate the situation and cause World War III. So we'll see what happens over the next several days, but my guess is we're going to know more probably in the next week. We're going to have some very good indication of where we're headed. Now, we probably won't know anything for several months regarding this war, but this is starting to drag in the United States a little bit more each and every day. So, as we get more information on this, I promise I'll bring you all the latest news and updates. But as of today, that is what we know. Russia continues to test these nuclear missiles, and the United States is a little bit concerned, and we should be. But at the same time, some are saying this is just Russia playing their games. So we'll see what happens. But again, thank you guys for watching. Consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys on the next one.